T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
I am the tiger, dancing through the fire. I am the champion, and you're gonna hear me roar.
Hi, this is Stephen Bryant with High Performance Leadership with Stephen Bryant. Excited to be here and talking with my new friend, Michael Brooks. We're going to be turning the tables a little bit tonight, and he's going to be interviewing me. We're going to be talking about some really cool things about my life's journey and my work with John Maxwell, as well as some of the things that I'm working on. So let's get the show started.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and it is a pleasure to be with you. I am down in beautiful and sunny San Diego, California. You are coming to us from Canada in Fort McMurray, so some 6,000 miles away. So modern technology. We had some technical issues a little earlier, but we've got them resolved, and we're ready to rock and roll with the premiere episode of High Performance Leadership. What a brilliant name. And you've got a brand new radio show on the Coach on Fire Radio Network. So how exciting is that? Not everyone can get into the Coach on Fire Radio Network. You're one of our brilliant 20-plus hosts from around the world. And you, as I said, hail from Canada. We'll get into that in a little bit. But welcome to your own show.
Hey, it's good to be a guest on my own show.
Yeah, so absolutely brilliant. A guest on your own show, and it's one of the favorite things I do with our host. As I said, we've got 20 hosts from around the world, everywhere from China to Switzerland, many in Canada and the UK, even one in Dubai. So we have got hosts from all over the world, and they're delivering transformational content every single week on the Coach on Fire Radio Network, and Stephen is going to be doing the same. And he's going to be talking about leadership, but before we get into everything that Stephen's going to be doing on his radio show and beyond, I want to talk a little bit about Stephen's journey. He has had an absolutely fascinating life. He's actually an American native, but now living and married to a Canadian. And he's been in the nonprofit sector. He's been a pastor for years, and he is just a brilliant leader, and is going to be getting into training leaders, emerging leaders, and experienced leaders as we go along. And that's what he's going to be talking about on his radio show. But, Stephen, let's talk a little bit about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, it's quite a journey. So back in 1988, I left retail management and went to New Brunswick to train to become a pastor. So I packed up at that particular time our two children, my wife, and our belongings, and headed up to actually near Heartland, New Brunswick, home of the world's longest covered bridge. So,
wow.
Yeah, so there you go. So I trained there, and then pastored in McAdam, New Brunswick for a couple of years, and then to St. John's, Newfoundland for 17 years. So, during that time was able to do some great things. I've always had a real passion for leading youth, and we were able to start up a youth group there in McAdam for the couple of years I was there. And again, then in St. John's, Newfoundland, we were working with youth. We had a camp out in Carbonear Summer Camp that had some great times with some great leaders that were surrounded me. So it was a great time. So in 2011, my wife and I really felt that we needed to change. And so I'd always kind of done what I wanted to do. I not really, but in a sense, I said, Patty, this is your time. I said, what would you like to do? And she says, I want to take care of my grandbabies. I said, all right. So that brought us to a move to Fort McMurray, Alberta. So when my plan was to pursue my master's in counseling, and so when we got here, really knew that I needed to work. So I ended up being a Housing First coordinator with the Center of Hope, which is Fort McMurray's only drop-in center for the homeless. So I worked at that for a few months, and then got transferred to outreach coordinator. And then about a year into my job, the executive director decided that she wanted to become a mom full time, and asked me if I would take over the leadership of the Center of Hope. So
Nice.
I was executive director there for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, I wanted to get into coaching and leadership training. So I was looking around, and one of my mentors actually suggested John Maxwell. Well, I knew John because of the number of books that I had read, really fascinated with John's perspective on leadership. And so what I did was join his online university. Then in trying to think, March of 2016, I went down to Orlando and then took his certification course and event, and from there was certified with John Maxwell. And during the same time, I was looking to lose some weight because I had told my wife, I said, I think if I'm going to be a coach and leader, I've got to be able to coach myself. And one of the areas that I was really struggling was with my weight. And so I actually through LinkedIn met somebody that was from Maine. I saw the number to call. It was a 207 area code back from my home state of Maine. And I called her up and found out that she lived 5 miles down the road from my sister-in-law. So
Wow.
Yeah, I know. But talking about a small world. So I joined with it's a nutrition company called Isogenics, and lost close to 40 pounds.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. So well, my transformation photos have made it all over the place, I guess, and I've been called Benjamin Button because I'm going to be turning 60 this year. Actually, next month. Actually, in 2 weeks.
Okay. Wow. Congratulations and happy birthday.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So through that, I really wanted to get that extra time into spend in pursuing that study. And so what I did was many of you know that there was a tremendous wildfire back in May of 2016. And we headed out of town, and we're in Calgary for a while. And then when we came back, I really felt that I probably needed a change. I wanted to spend that time on coaching and leadership, and being an executive director with a nonprofit like that, working with the homeless, it was all consuming. And
Sure.
at my age, I really want something that I can sink my teeth into. It's not that I didn't love what I was doing. I just wanted that time to be able to pursue those other interests. So as we came back from the wildfire, one of the first people I met was my now boss, Michelle Taylor, and we were talking about the wildfire and coming back. And then I said, I'm looking for a change. And she said, well, tell me about it. And then I was mentioning that. She said, well, actually, I've got a position you might be interested in. And it was the executive assistant at Waypoint. So I worked directly under her. And she said, Steve, you would be a perfect fit. You've got that those leadership qualities, the integrity. You've done a great job with the Center of Hope. You've made it more visible. And so actually, I heard the other day somebody was talking with her, said, yeah, I stole Steve from the Center of Hope.
Okay.
So I'm really enjoying that job because that does give me that time. And, coming back to, some of these things that I've been mentioning on social media, somebody picked up on it and said, hey, listen, do you want to be interviewed on a radio show? It's actually Sarah Shakespeare.
Live the Life You Love, one of the great Coach on Fire radio hosts. So absolutely.
Yeah, so Sarah's just an amazing lady, and so she interviewed me, and I think you heard that broadcast.
I did, and we invited you in. So
hey, and here I am.
There you are. It's amazing how destiny plays a role in just every little action you take by accepting that radio show, that interview that Sarah did with you on her Create the Life You Love on the Coach on Fire radio network, where it has led. And we've been working with you on some other things as well. And it's just amazing how one little step can take you in a whole different trajectory. And, and that's a pretty cool leadership lesson as well. And I know you want to get into coaching emerging leaders and training experienced leaders to be better leaders. And you mentioned that you're a John Maxwell certified coach, and I've read, well, at least, if not all, many of John's books. He is quite an individual and, has a knack for writing as well as speaking. What would you say the three big takeaways from your training down there in Orlando were that you learned from John?
I think one of the big takeaways was that for John himself, I think John in himself, his whole persona is, it's not about John Maxwell. It's about the other person. It's about integrity. It's about integrity. It's about building friendships. One of the great quotes that I heard from John is, a leader knows the way and shows the way. And not only does John know the way, but his exemplary persona, his who he is. I remember during one of the opening sessions, of course, there's one of these big hooplas, and people are coming on talking about that John was just voted the #1 leadership guru in the world by some magazine, and all these accolades that John has written, so many books. And John just kind of saunters on the stage and says, he says, forget all that. He said, I'm John Maxwell and I want to be your friend. So that really said, here's the guy that doesn't think too much of himself to a point where, what he does speaks for himself. So he doesn't have to add to that. One of the other things that, what I learned about that was one speaker basically told us he has no limbs at all. And I'm trying to think of what his name is, Nick. I can't remember his last name. But he talked about being persistent. One of the 3-word sayings is trust the process. A lot of times we want something to happen when we want it to happen. It doesn't always happen that way. But if we believe in the process, if we trust the process, and I think one of the other things is the importance of connecting with people on all levels. You need to be able to understand people. One of the things I talked with Sarah Shakespeare about, one of the great lessons that I learned when I was working as an outreach coordinator was we deal with a lot of indigenous population, and one of the things that I went through was called indigenous training. One of the great things that we don't do, and I think it's probably the impatience that we have in the North American culture, is that we don't listen with the intent of learning. We listen with the intent of putting in our own 2 cents worth. And what I found out from that and listening was you listen to everything that they have to say. And even those pauses don't mean it's a license to jump in and tell them what you think. You listen to the whole story. And I think one of the great things about that for anybody, it's empowering to be able to tell your own story. And for many of these people, that was the first time that anybody had really ever listened to what they had to say. So it's not only empowering for them, but it was empowering for me because I learned some great things in those lessons. You find out a lot about people. Then as you get to know people, as you get to know what motivates them, then you can lead them. And I think that's one of the I don't want to say a problem, but one of the issues with a lot of emergent leading is they're not taking the time to listen to their people. And I think that's extremely important.
Okay, that's a very valuable tip. Not taking the time to listen, or at least to listen thoroughly,
right?
And not interrupt. So, listening skills, one of the most important leadership tips that you can give. Brilliant, John, or brilliant, Stephen. Thank you for that. Do you have a couple other leadership tips that you might be able to give to emerging leaders other than listening thoroughly? Anything else?
Another thing that comes to mind is, as I actually, you'd asked me some of these questions.
Yes, I have.
I asked some of those who I have a great deal of respect for is a lot of them have struggles with facing negativity. Mm-hmm. In a leadership position, you're put on a pedestal in many ways, and there's a lot of negative comments sometimes about they don't feel that you're leading the way that they should. And I mean, there a lot of sometimes they're justified, sometimes not. But is learning to be able to deal with negativity in a positive way.